Hey everybody, welcome to Weekly Words. I'm going to do something a little different this week. I just kind of had something that's kind of been weighing in my heart, especially in kind of this season of Valentine's Day and, thinking about relationships and stuff like that. So I'm going to kind of share a little bit of a message before I go into this. I'll probably end up only sharing the spoken word part on Instagram just because this is probably going to get a little long and I'm not a preacher necessarily. So I'm trying something out a little bit new, just some things that I feel like I've been learning that is something that needs to be more important in the church and talked about a little bit more. So let me just share a quick message with you guys, and then I'll get into the spoken word piece. You guys can go listen to that on Instagram. I will likely post this whole video on Facebook, we'll see, and then the whole thing will definitely be on YouTube. So I'll put that link in my bio or just in the bottom of the post. So throughout these past few weeks, I feel like there's been a recurring theme that I've seen in sermons, chapels we've had at school, and that same theme has just been popping up, and I feel like God is trying to tell me something. You know those times when you're just like, this keeps happening. Maybe God's trying to speak to me. So the theme that's been popping up, it seems like in so many sermons, is the idea of giving our desires to God. And with that, the thing that they tend to bring up most when talking about desires is they talk about sexual desires and pornography. I've noticed that coming up a lot. And this is kind of something that's been near and dear to my heart, not because I personally struggle with pornography, but because I have definitely struggled with lust and other forms of sexual immorality, especially since coming to college. So I know what some of that feels like, and I've seen firsthand some of the consequences of that. And also just kind of the obsession that our country has with sex, how we put it into everything. We use it to sell things. We put it in almost every TV show, even kids shows. It feels like it just isn't safe from that anymore. So in kind of thinking about Valentine's Day, thinking about relationships, there are a couple things that felt important to me that I wanted to talk about. So first, I want to talk a little bit about me, a little bit about my testimony. So I wouldn't say necessarily that I've ever thought of myself as a super pretty or super feminine person. I'm not saying that I'm ugly. I've just never seen myself as the traditionally beautiful girl who gets the guy very often, or traditionally feminine, which has been a struggle for me personally, and I've also, I think in about high schoolish age, probably between 14 and 15 sometime. Like before that, I was just like, I don't really need guys. I don't really like boys. They're gross. And then it was like 16 and just flipped a switch. And I was like, I decided that I was ready for a relationship. So I was like, okay, I'm ready for a relationship now because it seems like everyone's starting to do that. So I feel like that's something I should pursue. And so I did, and it just wasn't happening for me. And because of things that I was dealing with at that point in time, just stuff at home and just kind of internal stuff, it ended up becoming almost an obsession for me. And it drove me into places of sexual immorality that I didn't think I would go because I wanted to feel close to somebody. And I think that's something that we don't think about sometimes, is that we see someone being sexually immoral. We see someone looking at pornography and we think, oh, that's horrible and gross. Like, I would never do that. Why would you do something like that? And what they're longing for biblical sexual companionship is not wrong in itself. The problem is that has been twisted And they may be looking to that because they don't feel like they have a chance of, or they just don't have in their life that partner that they can share that with. And because of that, they act out and they try to find something that will fulfill them. They try to fill a hole that God was meant to fill, and if it is His will, that a spouse is meant to fill. And so I found myself in areas of sexual immorality that just kind of brought me down and became a really big part of my life. And you know, when you let sin in, you think to yourself, I can just kind of stop whenever I want to, but that's not what ends up happening. And if you let it in, it will take a foothold. Like people, even people in secular society are asking questions that I can answer. Because we let sin take a small foothold in our society, and slowly, first it becomes tolerable, then acceptable, and then celebrated. I saw that quote somewhere on like Facebook or something. But it's so true. And that's what sin does. It's like, I'm not so bad. Like, if you just think about it, like, if you're just a little open to it, it'll be fine. And then it becomes acceptable. It's like, this is, everybody does this, it's fine. And then it's celebrated. And it's like, this keeps happening. And that's why we have issues like this, because we let it in, we let it have a small foothold. And that's what happened in my life. And I've ended up sharing parts of my life and parts of myself with people who didn't deserve it, and who didn't fight for it, and who wouldn't fight for it, because I wanted to try to fill a hole that I should have tried to fill with God. And because I've seen that happen in my own life, and because I've seen it happen in other people's lives, this is something that I want to talk about. This is not something that I'm doing to like preach down on people. This is something that I'm almost doing to find people to relate to be like, hey guys, this is difficult for me. Like, this is where I'm at right now. And if there are people who are feeling like that, you're not alone. And also, I don't want to be alone in this. So if you're out there and you like hear this and it speaks to you, hit me up. Like, so I guess the first thing that I want to say is I just want to acknowledge the fact that singleness does hurt sometimes. I think that's something we are very ashamed and very scared to say, is that when we are not happy being single, it's not okay, and that it's almost unnatural. And you immediately get labels like, you're so desperate, or you're so needy, or like, and people will tell you, oh, your time will come, you just need to wait. And you get tired of hearing it eventually. It hurts sometimes, like, I get it, but do not give up. Like, don't let yourself go somewhere that you know is going to hurt you in the long run, or hurt other people in the long run, because you are tired of being single. So some of the things that I've noticed in my own life, and some of the things that I've heard from other people, is just things like starting your life out alone. Like, I'm going to graduate from school, and like, this is a school where it is very emphasized that you're going to find your spouse here, ring before spring, you know? And I'm going to graduate alone. I'm going to start a new life alone, probably in a new city I've never been to before, and that's scary. Like, I'd like to start my life out with somebody. I'd like to almost plan where I'm going to go around where someone else is. That, like, it structures your life. It gives you stability. Like, the feeling of protection. You want that. And, like, it also makes you feel insecure. You feel like there is something wrong with me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be alone. And that's not necessarily the truth. Like, it's not always your fault that you're single. You just haven't met the person who was meant to love you, who God created for you. And there may not be that person. That's not something I wanted to hear either, but it's something that I did hear. And I think it's actually important, is that my time may not come. I may not end up with someone. You may not end up with someone. And that is why it is so important for me to delve into this, and to dig into it, and to dig into God, and to trust in God, because I know personally that I can't let go of this. This has been something that this is like, you've heard of like Paul had like a thorn in his side. We don't know what it is, but this is mine. Like, this gets me every day. I struggle with this every day. It makes its way into so many areas of my life, and I know the only way that I'm going to overcome it is with this. So, another thing, sexual desire and being feminine. So these things I feel like you can almost connect. Like I said, I've never felt like a traditionally feminine person. I feel like there's some things you need to do to be feminine that I don't do or like to do. I will never wear makeup unless my mom tells me to or my friends do it for me. I don't know how to do makeup. I don't want to buy makeup. I don't want to get up 2 hours earlier to do makeup, so I don't. I don't do makeup. I'm fine with that. There are certain things I don't wear very often. I wouldn't say that I'm a generally womanly shape. I don't know. Like, I've been told before that you have big arms, you kind of look like a man. It was by a little kid, so I wasn't mad, but I also you know it's true when it comes from a little kid. So there's an idea of what it means to be feminine, and I think sometimes the stereotype that people associate with being feminine is you need to be weak and you need to be quiet and you gotta want to have a bunch of babies, all this kind of stuff. And that's not necessarily what it means to be feminine. Like, I can't give you a flat out biblical definition. I can read you guys a verse quick, but I don't think that all these stereotypes that we have placed on feminism and what it means to be feminine are necessarily right. This is from Proverbs 14. I had this highlighted, actually. I was looking up verses about what it means to be a godly woman, and I had actually had this highlighted at some point. This is Proverbs 14, verse 1. It says, the wise woman builds her house but with her own hands, the foolish one tears hers down. It's like, yeah, build your house, guys. Like, build your life. You don't have to wait for a guy to do it for you. You don't have to subscribe to being stereotypically feminine. And then lastly, what I want to talk about in terms of singleness is like the shame of actually genuinely struggling with singleness. That is not something you want to admit to anybody. Saying I genuinely struggle and it genuinely hurts me that I'm single is not something you want to say, because then people kind of look at you and they're like, oh, she's desperate, she's thirsty, stuff like that. And it's like, no, like, let's stop with that right now. If someone honestly talks to you about being single, do not call them desperate. If someone honestly says this really hurts, like this is something I'm dealing with and I think it's leading me places I don't want to go, do not call them desperate. And do not make them feel ashamed of wanting that, especially if you already have it. Like, be understanding. And, like, come alongside of each other. Why is it so hard to be single? I have several verses that I found on some of this stuff here. I want to talk about loneliness and discontent and how it can kind of lead us to sin because we want to feel loved. And I completely understand, but do not do it. I've done this multiple times with multiple people where I met them, they showed me attention, and so my natural reaction, being the wise person that I am, was to be, oh, they must like me, so I'm just going to do whatever they want me to do. Sexual sin does hurt you, and it will consume you if you let it get a foothold. And honestly, it can come a lot from obsessing over relationships. Another quote that I heard from a sermon recently was that if something is an idol to you, you are crushed when it's taken away. If you want something and it's taken away, you're kind of like, you're disappointed, but it's not devastating. Whereas if something is an idol to you, it's devastating. And that hit me like a ton of bricks, because I was like, I have had conversations with God like this. I have said, God, why would you give me this desire and then force me to be in a position where that can't be fulfilled? And like, I can't do this. I've had those conversations with God. And that's how I know this is an idol for me. And the only way that you get rid of idols is to put your focus on an actual real God. And there's only one of those. So just kind of talking about like the idea of sexual sin, I think that we don't like to put a label on it. We don't like to say this is flat out wrong, because so many people are okay with it nowadays that we don't want to just tell them flat out, you shouldn't do that. That's not right. And it's pretty hard to, especially when you're really trying to commit your life to God, to be in a situation where it feels like you're the only one who really wants to call sin what it is. I think it's important that we do that as Christians. That doesn't mean we're being judgmental and being like, you're a sinner or anything like that. But we need to call sin what it is. We can't just cover over it and candy coat it because we might offend somebody or because we don't want to stop what we're doing. We need to call it what it is. So let me just read a passage from Romans quick. I had a couple other ones here. 1 Corinthians 6, 9 through 11. I might read that one too. Let me just get to Romans here quick. Also, this has my favorite verse, Romans 1:16. Let's go. All right, so Romans 1, 26 through 27 says, because of this, God gave them over to shameful lusts. Even women exchange natural relations for unnatural ones. In the same way, men also abandoned natural relations with women and were inflamed with lust for one another. Men committed indecent acts with other men and received in themselves the due penalty for their perversion. Let me just read 1 Corinthians 6, 9, 11 quick. I feel like that verse in particular is more geared towards homosexuality. Romans literally calls it out right there. And that is something I feel like as Christians we don't like to speak out on. We don't like to tell the truth on, because it's such a big movement right now. So let me find, this one I think was just more general for people in general. Like, whatever lust you're dealing with. So 1 Corinthians 6, 9 and 11, it says, do you not know that the wicked will not inherit the kingdom of God? Do not be deceived. Neither the sexually immoral, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor male prostitutes, nor homosexual offenders, nor thieves, nor the greedy, nor drunkards, nor slanderers, nor swindlers will inherit the kingdom of God. And that is what some of you were. But you were washed, you were sanctified, you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ by the Spirit of our God. This is not condemnation, you guys. This is trying to keep you safe and trying to warn you of things that are not ultimately going to fulfill you. Like, this is not meant to be accusatory. This is telling you guys, this is going to hurt you in the long run. And I know this. I know it personally, because I thought that I could do this. I thought that it would be fine. And it ended up being something that really hurt me, because I used sexual sin as a way to experience a love and a pleasure that I wasn't getting and that I wanted. And I compromised my beliefs in exchange for love, and that never works. If you are with someone who you feel that you need to compromise what you believe and what your values are with them, if you feel like you need to do that in exchange for their love, then they are not worth your time. I'm just gonna be real with you guys. Because it leads to giving people stuff they don't deserve, cheating, and being hurt by people that you cared about. Another thing that I don't think we'd like to talk about, jealousy is real. The general desire behind it is not in itself evil, but it's when it takes over and kind of directs how we feel towards other people and how we treat other people because they have something we want. Like, it says do not covet because it will consume you. Like, jealousy really is the big green giant. It doesn't allow you to feel happy in situations where you notice that other people have something you don't. It's not a great feeling, and it hurts. Like, it's not necessarily wrong to look at someone and think, oh, I kind of like to have that. But when you were, like, coveting what they have and you were, like, holding on to that and it almost builds up a resentment, it's just not healthy. So, like, how do we deal with that? And really, the only way that we can deal with maybe never finding someone, maybe being single for the rest of our lives, is giving our deepest desires to God. I think the first sermon in this kind of long string of sermons that I heard about it, I had recently asked God, if this is my deepest desire, if this is something you know that, like, my heart longs for so deeply, what do I do with it? Would you really take this away from me? And the pastor said, I perked up because the pastor said, so what do we do with our deepest desires that aren't being fulfilled? And I kind of perked up and I was like, oh, this is it. I'm finally getting an answer to my question. And he said, we give them to God. And we give them up. And I just started crying immediately. Because I was like, and that's kind of how I knew that this was an idol. Because it was at that moment that I realized that I may not ever have this. I may not ever be with someone. My deepest desire may not ever be fulfilled. And I have to be willing to give that up. There's a story in the Bible about the rich young ruler who asked Jesus what he needed to do, I think, to get in the kingdom of heaven is the language. You guys can totally correct me on that. But he was basically asking Jesus what he needed to do to follow him, and Jesus told him to sell everything he had. And to me, when I heard that, I was like, okay, like, I guess that kind of stinks, especially if you're rich. But it says he went away sad, and I thought that was kind of a wimpy response. And then it was kind of in this moment that I understood. I was like, that's what he felt like about his money. His money was his deepest desire. My deepest desire is to be married to someone. Your deepest desires will control you. They will make their way into parts of your life you don't want them to, and they will hurt you, and they will not allow you to be happy. When you give them to God, he may or may not ask you to give them up. I don't know what he's going to do with this yet. But I know that the only way I'm going to be okay until I figure that out is by delving into this, trying to understand it, and, just building a stronger faith. Let me just read a quick verse in Isaiah, if I can find Isaiah. Oh, there you are. I haven't read Isaiah in a while. So this is Isaiah 58:11. And this is what it says. This is just the promise that God gives us. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail. Guys, even if I never find this true love, even though you may not have a Valentine this year, if you start to give yourself to God, He will strengthen you in ways that you didn't even think about. And if He is not going to fulfill what are your deepest desires, He will reform your mind, He will renew your mind, and you will have new deepest desires that line up with His, and you will feel satisfied. I'm not telling you this because I'm perfect. I'm not even telling you this because I have gotten completely over all this stuff. This is a current thing for me. I'm still dealing with lust. I'm still dealing with sexual immorality. I'm still dealing with loneliness. All of this is battering me over the head every day. And the only thing I have to fight that is this. And that is why I want to share it with you. Because if there are people who are feeling the way that I am, if there are people who are in maybe even a rock bottom area right now, like, this is the truth that I want to say to you, I guess. Another thing that we can do, I think, to mold ourselves into better people, to understand better what singleness and marriage and loving God even means, is like, what is love? And that's a question that I just kind of asked myself recently. Is like, I've had kind of an idealistic view of love. You know, to me, love is not sitting on the opposite couch alone while your roommates cuddle, or going out on a date on Valentine's Day, or having someone bring you flowers, whatever. But that's not all that it is. There's so much more to it. 1 Corinthians 13, I think, is one that a lot of people bring up, a lot of people recite. It's long, so I'm not going to say that whole one. I'm going to take you to Psalms instead. Also, I did have a date on Valentine's Day. It was my roommate, Janelle. It was amazing. We had 2 baskets of breadsticks, and we still have more. So this is Psalm 34:17. It says, "The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears them. He delivers them from all their troubles." That doesn't mean that God delivers us necessarily from everything that we feel is hurting us, but He loves us, and He knows what's going to damage us in the long run. And even when we can't necessarily see that, He does. He sees what's ahead, and He knows what maybe needs to be cut out of our lives, even when it's painful for us. So I guess what my message would be, that I've been rambling on about for apparently 30 minutes, is that I understand. I understand what it feels like. I know how badly it hurts sometimes. And I don't want anyone to feel ashamed of genuinely not wanting to be single, genuinely hurting about that, or people who are struggling with pornography addiction or any sort of like sexual immorality, where either the church has pushed you out or you just don't feel like you can keep coming to people with the same thing anymore. We have to come alongside each other. We have to be there for each other. And even if I don't know you, like, hit me up. If this spoke to you, if this means something to you, I'm there. And I understand what it's like. But I would encourage you not to take that step outside of your beliefs, not to compromise in exchange for a love that isn't real. Because in the end, it will hurt. I've watched people have used me to cheat on their girlfriends, and I had no idea. I had to find that out the hard way. But if I hadn't allowed myself to compromise on that, if I had set up boundaries, then I would have never had to tell someone's girlfriend that. I've watched it happen to friends of mine. I've heard about it happening to other people. It's messy. Pornography, cheating, it's all messy, and it all happens because of our unbridled sexual desire and that we don't put those boundaries in place. You don't need that to be loved. You are loved by God. You are loved by people around you. And if someone is asking you to do something or making you compromise on your beliefs in exchange for love, it's not real. And you deserve better than that. So, once again, welcome to Weekly Words. Let me just dig quick into the spoken word piece, and then I'm going to let y'all go. These are just a few of the things that have been said to me over the years that have just kind of hit me. You got anyone special in your life? Just wait on the Lord, your time will come. Sounds pretty desperate to me. Your arms are big, you look like a man. I'm not really looking for a relationship. It hurts, but those of us who feel it hide it. It's shameful to admit and hard to find someone to confide in. How do you tell people that your heart's desire without acquiring the label desperate? How do you tell them that all you can think about is how life together must be better than separate? And if you're a woman, the shame of your lust is even worse. You can't struggle with desire if you carry a purse. I gave my innocence away, hoping that if I gave you parts of my body, I could exchange it for love. I never gave them everything, but it was all still too much and at the same time not enough. That big green giant is looming over your head. All the while you might look into the future with dread. It's hard to celebrate with those who know the feel of a kiss that was not meant in deception. To turn an unselfish gaze upon those who have gained your long sought after affection. They plan their lives together full of love and protection, but you must still lick your own heart's wounds of pain and rejection.